13 feet. That is the distance between the tourists climbing Notre Dame this summer and a Roman city nobody told them was there. Right now, as a line of 300 people waits in the heat to reach the gargoyles, a team of archaeologists is digging straight down beneath their shoes. And in the first months of 2026, they have been hauling as many as 15 crates of artifacts out of that hole every single day. Some of it sits just 20 inches under the pavement. Less than 2 feet below 1,000 footsteps an hour. So here is the question we are going to answer right now, with a hard number instead of a tease. How old is the ground under that line? The proof came up as an ugly black disc, eaten by rust, the kind of thing you would toss back on a beach. Under an X-ray, a face appeared on it. Constantine, the Roman emperor who ruled from the year 306 to 337. That single coin dates the soil it was buried in, and it tells the team they have dug down into Roman Paris, a city that was already 400 years old when that coin was struck, and that sat here more than 8 centuries before the first stone of Notre Dame was laid in 1163. That is what is down there. A buried city, stacked in layers, under one of the most photographed buildings on Earth. And the strangest object in the whole dig is not the coin, and it is not a coffin. It is a set of markings painted on broken pottery, the same mark repeating on shard after shard, and not one expert on the planet has been able to read them. We are going to get to those markings, because they are the part of this story nobody can explain. But first we need to understand how this dig even happened, and why for centuries no one was allowed to put a shovel into this ground at all. Let us start with what this excavation actually is, because the headlines have been sloppy about it. This is not a secret vault. Nobody stumbled into a hidden chamber. This is a rescue dig, what the French call a fouille preventive, and it is happening on the Parvis, the open forecourt in front of the cathedral. The work is led by Camille Colonna of the Pôle archéologique de la Ville de Paris, the city's own archaeology unit, working alongside the National Institute INRAP. The trench they opened runs about 100 feet long and goes down 13 feet. And the reason they are digging is almost mundane. After the cathedral reopened in December of 2024, the city of Paris decided to redesign the square. They want to soften it, cool it, plant more than 100 trees, because the bare stone bakes in the summer sun. The plan, by the landscape architect Bas Smets, will run a thin sheet of water across the stone to drop the surface temperature by as much as 18 degrees Fahrenheit on the hottest days. It is a project worth close to $60 million. But in a city as old as Paris, you cannot just dig holes for tree roots. The law requires that anything beneath the soil be examined and recorded before construction touches it. So a slice of the forecourt became an open pit, ringed by barriers, crossed by a wooden walkway, a few steps from the tourist line. And the moment the concrete slab was lifted in January of 2026, walls appeared, old walls. The team has been pulling history out of the ground ever since. Now think about what 20 inches means. The people queuing for the cathedral are standing on top of medieval Paris, with less than 2 feet of dirt between them and a vanished world. Dig down through that, and the layers begin to separate like pages in a book. At the top, the cellars of medieval houses. Below them, pits dug by people in the early Middle Ages, the Merovingian and Carolingian periods, roughly the 6th through the 10th centuries. These were grain pits, storage holes, the everyday infrastructure of a working town. And below those, darker and deeper, the dense remains of a Roman quarter from the 4th and 5th centuries. 20 centuries pressed into 13 feet of earth. The Roman layer is where it gets genuinely strange because of what the stone tells us about a city in retreat. In Roman times, this place was called Lutetia, and its real center sat across the river on the left bank, on the hill we now call the Montagne Sainte-Geneviève, with a forum, public baths, and an amphitheater that seated thousands. But starting in the middle of the 3rd century, waves of Germanic invasions pushed the population off the open left bank and onto the island, the Ile de la Cité, which was easier to defend. By the early 4th century, they had walled it off, and here is the detail that stops you. They built that rampart out of stone, ripped from their own demolished monuments on the left bank. A civilization tearing down its own grand buildings to wall itself in. And in this very dig, the team found a Roman doorstep, taken from a larger building and laid upside down to serve as paving for a road. Reused, repurposed. The physical fingerprint of a city shrinking in on itself, surviving however it could. This island was no backwater. Lutetia is where the Roman general Julian was proclaimed emperor by his own troops in the year 360. The Emperor Valentinian lived here briefly a few years later. The ground under that tourist line held the politics of the late Roman world, and then it held everything that came after. On top of the Roman city came the medieval one, and this is where the dig turns almost intimate. The archaeologists have confirmed the remains of a cluster of houses long known from old records as the Maison de la Huchette, along with the line of a narrow medieval street. When Notre Dame rose in 1163 under Bishop Maurice de Sully, the square in front of it was not open at all. It was packed with houses, split by a single street called the Rue Neuve Notre Dame, about 250 feet long and barely 20 feet wide. People lived here, crammed against the growing cathedral, for 600 years, until the square was finally cleared in the 1700s and the 1800s. And the everyday objects survived in the unlikeliest place. The best preserved finds, intact jugs, drinking cups, a cooking pot, even a candlestick, came out of old latrines, cesspits that doubled as rubbish dumps. The soft, waste-filled soil sealed those vessels and protected them for centuries while everything around them crumbled. One of the conservators, Valentine Brelou, has spent her career cleaning artifacts, and she has called these among the most astonishing she has ever handled. Hold that thought, because she said it about something very specific, and we are coming back to it. If you are finding this as fascinating as we do, take a second to subscribe. We dig into discoveries like this every week, the documented and the debated, the things hiding under places you thought you already knew. Now let us get to the question that has been sitting under this whole story. Why was no one allowed to dig here until a fire forced the issue? Here is the uncomfortable truth about Notre Dame. For most of its 860-year history, it was protected as a historic monument, a sacred standing building, but it was never treated as an archaeological site. The floors were not to be disturbed. The forecourt was paved over, and for decades cars even parked beneath it. The official position, expressed by heritage authorities themselves, was that the cathedral was a monument to be preserved, not a dig to be opened. So the layers we are now reading sat sealed and untouchable, not because of some grand conspiracy, but because the rules around the building made the ground effectively off-limits. In fact, the last time anyone dug deep into this square, it was not for history at all. It was for parking. In 1962, the city decided to build an underground garage in front of the cathedral, and from 1965 to 1972, an excavation led by the historian Michel Fleury cut into the soil. What his team found was so important that the garage plan changed. They uncovered Gallo-Roman quays, the remains of houses heated by Roman underfloor systems, and a stretch of the late Roman wall. To save it, the city built a museum around it, underground, and opened it in 1980. It runs nearly 390 feet beneath the Parvis, one of the largest archaeological crypts in Europe. And most of the tourists in that line have no idea it is there, directly under their feet, as they wait. The same thing happened in Athens. When the city dug its subway for the 2004 Olympics, it set off the largest excavation in Greek history and pulled up tens of thousands of objects, many now displayed in the metro stations themselves. Dig anywhere in a truly old city, and the past comes up whether you wanted it or not. And then came the fire. The spire collapsed live on screens around the world. And in the wreckage, almost as an afterthought, the disaster did something no committee ever would. It opened the building to science. To erect the 800-ton scaffolding needed to rebuild the spire, crews had to dig into the floor. And the emergency law that followed the fire put archaeologists on site to watch every cut. The fire is quite literally the reason we can now see what is beneath Notre Dame. That access was not always smooth. When the interior excavation produced its biggest finds, a French art history publication publicly accused the National Institute of Obstruction of refusing journalists access to what had been recovered. The Institute's answer was that the objects were too fragile, the paint too delicate to handle before conservation. That turned out to be true, but the friction was real, and it is the honest version of the institutional tension here, not a cover-up, a standoff over fragile, priceless material that the public very much wanted to see. So what did the interior dig find? And this is a separate event from the forecourt, so keep them apart in your head. The forecourt is the Roman and medieval city we have been walking through. The interior dig happened in 2022, inside the cathedral, at the crossing of the transept, and it was run by the National Institute under the archaeologist Christophe Besnier. They were only authorized to go down about 16 inches at first. What they found stopped the project cold. 2 lead coffins, shaped to the human body, buried beneath the floor. One of them carried a plaque. It belonged to Antoine de la Porte, a canon of the cathedral, a wealthy patron of the arts who died in 1710 at the age of 83. Lead coffins were the privilege of the elite, the same metal used to line the casket of a modern queen, because lead keeps out moisture and slows decay. His identity was settled the moment they read the inscription. The second coffin had no plaque, and that is where the real argument began. Inside the second coffin lay a man who died in his 30s. His skull had been sawn open, a sign of embalming, and the bone itself showed signs of having been shaped and banded since childhood, the kind of deliberate head shaping that startles people when they first see it. His pelvis and bones showed the wear of a lifetime on horseback. The team nicknamed him the Cavalier, the Horseman. And in 2024, a professor of biological anthropology at the University of Toulouse, Eric Krubezi, proposed a name that set off headlines around the world. He suggested this was Joachim du Bellay, one of the most celebrated French poets of the 16th century, a man known to have suffered from tuberculosis and chronic illness, who died in 1560, and whose exact burial place had been lost for more than 400 years. It is a beautiful theory, a lost poet found under the floor of Notre Dame. But the man who actually led the dig does not buy it. Christophe Besnier pointed to the chemistry of the teeth. Isotopes lock into our teeth in childhood and record where we grew up, what water we drank, what we ate. And the analysis of this man's teeth pointed to someone raised in the Paris region, or the Rhône Alps, not in Anjou in western France, where Du Bellay spent his childhood. A heritage official added that the studies are far from finished, and that other signs point to a different person entirely. Krubezi fired back that Du Bellay was actually raised by an uncle who had been a bishop of Paris, which could explain the Paris signature. So who is the man in the second coffin? Right now, honestly, we do not know. The experts who stood over the same bones disagree here in print with their names attached. That is what a real archaeological mystery looks like. Not a YouTube thumbnail. A genuine, unresolved scientific dispute between the people who know the most. And speaking of YouTube thumbnails, let us clear something up, because if you searched this topic, you have seen them. Secret chamber under Notre Dame. A room that should not exist. A lost vault opened after centuries. None of that is real. There is no secret chamber. There is no impossible room. What is real is a buried Roman and medieval city, a disputed coffin, and the painted markings we still have not explained. The truth is strange enough on its own. It does not need a fake vault bolted onto it, because the cathedral was keeping a different kind of secret, and this one was hidden inside its own walls. After the 2019 fire exposed the structure, a team of researchers published a study in the journal PLOS One in 2023, and what they proved rewrote how we understand the building. Notre Dame is the first Gothic cathedral known to use iron as a true structural binding material, not decoration. Skeleton. The medieval builders drove several thousand iron staples through the stone, starting from the earliest construction phase in the 1160s, some of them up to 20 inches long, forge welded from iron of different sources. The lead author, Maxime Lheritier of the University of Paris 8, put it plainly. When they looked at other Gothic churches of the same period, none used iron this way. The staples are what let the builders push Notre Dame to a height no building had reached before, around 105 feet at its construction, the tallest structure of its age. The cathedral was an engineering gamble held together by hidden iron, and we only learned it because it burned. Which brings us back to the dirt, and to the one thing in this entire dig that nobody can read. Remember Valentine Breloux, the conservator, and the find she called the most astonishing of her career. It was not the coin, it was the pottery. As the team cleaned what looked like ordinary medieval ceramics, they found faint reddish markings painted on the inside, and not random ones. The same marks, repeating, shard after shard after shard. A pattern. What do they mean? Here is where we are careful with you, because you deserve the honest version. As of right now, no one knows. No expert has offered an interpretation. We do not know if they are potter's marks, owner's marks, merchant's signs, religious symbols, or something else entirely. This detail comes from a single reported account of the dig, and the French research lab has not yet published a formal analysis. So we are not going to tell you it is a secret code or a hidden message, because that would be a lie. What we can tell you is that trained specialists, people who have cleaned thousands of fragments, looked at these marks and could not place them. A repeated, deliberate symbol, painted by medieval hands, sitting in the ground under Notre Dame, waiting for someone to finally read it. And maybe that is the right place to end. Not with an answer, but with the line. Go back to the start, to the hundreds of people waiting in the summer heat to climb the towers. They are standing on a coin with a Roman emperor's face. On the grain pits of people who lived here 1,200 years ago. On the cups and the cooking pot of a medieval street that vanished. On a symbol nobody can read. All of it, 13 feet down, under millions of footsteps, year after year, completely unseen. The city was always there. It just took a fire to remind us to look. And the deepest layers, the ones from before the Romans, the team has not even reached yet.